ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا زدنا علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, inshallah, today we are continuing our hadith per week from Riyadh al-Salihin. Who can remind me which chapter we are on in Riyadh al-Salihin? It's the same as last week. Anyone? As-sidq, truthfulness. Last week we talked about how, the hadith from last week, whoever asks Allah for shahada, Allah will raise him to the status of the shaheed even if he dies on his bed. Because what Allah is rewarding is the truthfulness of that dua. Someone is being truthful and honest, that they ask Allah for that, so Allah will grant it to them. Today's hadith is an interesting one because this is sometimes mentioned it's from the previous nations. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm a little bit tired today. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, one of the earlier prophets who was out on an expedition proclaimed among his people that no man should follow him who had married a woman with whom he wished to live with but had not done so, or who had built houses on which they had not put the roof, or who had bought a sheep or pregnant she-camels and was expecting them to produce young. In other words, he wanted them to be of a clear mind without distractions. If you have something, unfinished business or something waiting for you at home, it might distract you. So it's a very serious expedition. And so he then went on the expedition and approached the town at the time of Asr, or a little bit before. So he told the sun, this prophet is speaking to the sun, Ash-Shams, that both it and he were under the command of Allah, and then prayed to Allah to hold it back for them. So it was held back till Allah gave him victory. And then he collected the spoils of war, and the fire came to devour it. In the time, the ghanima was always burned. Whatever they capture would be burned. So it was never collected. This is something that's different for the later nations. But it didn't come this time. And that meant there's something wrong. And so he said among the people, there must be a man who stole from the war booty. And he told them that a man from every tribe must come and give the bay'ah again. And each tribe member did that. One of them, their hand stuck to the hand of that prophet. And he said, there is a thief from you, and it's from, the hands of 2 or 3 people, stuck to his. And he said the thief is from these tribes, basically. And so they brought him a head of gold, like a cow's head. And when he laid it down, the fire came and devoured the spoils. Spoils were not allowed before anyone before us. This is the Prophet ﷺ now saying. Then Allah allowed spoils to us as He saw our weakness and incapacity and allowed them to us. So it's a very interesting hadith. This is muttafaqun alayh, narrated in both Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Again, recapping what was going on. In a previous nation, a very serious expedition was undertaken, and at the end, Allah gave them victory. All this war booty and spoils were collected, and it was supposed to be burned. In other words, they're not allowed to keep it. It didn't happen. The miracle of it burning did not happen, meaning something was stolen and kept. And so they identified who it was, and they found what was missing, and then it was burning. It's interesting because it's something that our situation cannot experience because we don't have this condition on us. But how does this intersect with as-sidq, with truthfulness? Well, let's analyze it a little bit. Of course, there's the man from this story who kept behind something, and that was a dishonest thing. He was stealing basically the war booty to keep for himself and did not produce it until he was forced to do so. This is not working out so well. And then when he did it, Allah, it's part of their ibadah that they were supposed to give this up fi sabilillah. What Allah has done is illustrating why He has allowed it for our ummah, because that that would have driven us to the same problem. We would not have been able to hold up to that standard. In other words, there are certain rulings, there are certain differences in our Sharia today that are different from the Sharia of the previous nations. And among those things, most of them are Allah making things easy on us. Why? Because if it was too hard, it might push us into dishonesty. We would struggle to remain truthful, to uphold that standard. So there are differences. For example, previous nations, they were not allowed to give up their deen or to say a word of kufr even if they didn't mean it, even if they're being tortured to death. They must remain steadfast saying the shahada until they are dead. Whereas in Islam, now, we are allowed to save our lives by saying a word of kufr. If they say, worship this idol, or do this, or we're going to kill you, or say this thing of kufr, or we'll kill you, we are permitted, and in fact, it's considered in a way like a command from Allah, the Prophet ﷺ. However, it is better to not do it, but it's not obligatory. For previous nations, it was obligatory. They were not allowed to give up their Islam. And there are other things, for example, with regards to the punishment of certain things. Like, for example, we know from the Surah Yusuf that the Sharia of Yaqub alayhi salam, what's mentioned about the Sharia of Yaqub alayhi salam in Surah Yusuf? Does anybody know? Yes. Oh, this is a good one. Yes, it was permitted in that time for a greeting or show of respect by doing sajda. And that is what Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers, father and mother did to him. And it's from the dream at the beginning. That's a good point. I wasn't thinking of that. I was thinking of another one. What's the punishment for someone who steals? Yes, this is how Yusuf alayhi salam was able to get his brother to stay. He manufactured the plot where it would look like he had stolen something, and the punishment according to their Sharia was that that person should be kept and held back, basically. So we don't have that. It's just, we have different rules. So the point is, we also have to recognize that sometimes making things difficult on people can push them to where they fall into not being truthful. Allah has made our deen easy on us, and it protects us from becoming untruthful where we otherwise, would be too hard for us. It's very interesting. I'm sure there are other takeaways, but this is what I understood when I read this hadith, is that, subhanAllah, this would be very hard nowadays, and many other things as well. Allah has made our deen easy. This is the deen, the middle path, the easy way. So we have to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have even less of an excuse compared to the previous nations and previous times to fall into lying or being untruthful and things like that. So we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from falling into deceit, from lies, being untruthful. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the situation that pushes us to the point where we start to wish or think, can I just lie? Can I be untruthful? Let me be dishonest to get out of the situation. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us steadfast on the truth, both in our deen, in our dunya, in all of our worldly affairs and otherwise. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant relief and victory and freedom from oppression and disaster and trauma and harm to all of our brothers and our sisters throughout the world, in Gaza, in Palestine, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Kashmir, in Sudan, in all the places that we know and that we don't know, in Syria, in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Chad. Honestly, if you name all the countries, you're going to find a lot. We ask Allah, you know better than us, give relief to all of our brothers and sisters and all the oppressed people around the world, free them from oppression and grant them victory over their oppressors. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك جزاكم الله خير السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته